Alrighty, just do a little miniature deck tech on this mid-range zoo sort of shell. Wow. It developed sort of from a more aggro sort of build that I tried with Dreadhorde Arcanist, and here we go, finally, gosh darn it, MTGO. The more sort of aggro shell, where I had some more Phyrexian spells. That's not quite the... That is another improvised... I ended up making about 4 different clones, as you can see down the side here. Yeah, this one was sort of... A lot of Phyrexian mana spells there to sort of get extra triggers, extra prowess triggers, and just things that are easily castable through the Dreadhorde Arcanist. I was very aware of not putting in too many 2-mana spells that required Dreadhorde Arcanist to be pumped first, which is where Haze of Rage is just brilliant, because it gives it the initial pump. It's got 2 power by the time you go to combat, where you can flash it back, and the Storm. Gosh darn, Haze of Rage can do some damage, but that's not why we're here today. That's just sort of how it started. And I tried as best as I could to keep the Arcanist in and the Young Pyromancer, because I just love those cards, especially the Young Pyromancer. But I couldn't do it. Didn't work out that way. And so we've ended up with this. I'm almost feeling like another land or two could be fine, but then I have a game where I use all my lootings just pitching extra lands. So, but that's, you know, having lands there as pitch fodder for the Faithless Looting is never a bad thing. And with the Sunbaked Canyons, it's fine. I mean, mate, I almost should get a couple more Sunbaked Canyons. I'm not too sure. I'm pretty happy with the mana base. I never really have any issues getting what I want when I want. It. If I have a Wild Nacatl turn 1, it's very rare that I don't also have the correct combination of lands, whether it's fetches or just a basic and a shock, to get the Nacatl onto 3/3 with the Mountain Plains abilities that it's got. I have a little bit of face burn. I mean, well, we'll look at the creatures first. The creatures, Wild Nacatl, 4 of. It's just an early 1-drop. I want to be able to apply early pressure. Early pressure is very important in Modern, and having something to do on turn 1 is just crucial. I mean, it's always fine to loot away a couple extra lands, or loot away some face burn that you're not sure you'll need in the Boros Charm, or something, a later turn play. Like, it's very hard to say goodbye to a Bloodbraid Elf, but on turn 1, if you don't have much else to do and you're sort of flooded out on lands, maybe Bloodbraid Elf is the most pitchable thing you've got. Crashing Footballs, wow. Crashing Footfalls are also quite pitchable, but and that's another. I'm sort of in the middle on it. I just love the card. It's especially great when you can cascade it off Bloodbraid Elf, and that's a part of the reason I've got it in. I did have it at 4, but I've dropped it down to 3 because I just didn't like taking up too many slots on something that I can't cascade. Like, I'm just having to suspend it every time, but having less copies means I'm less likely to hit it off the Bloodbraid Elf. Wow, I'm slurring my words quite a lot today. Yeah, so that's sort of a tough decision to make, but anyway, so yeah, the turn 1 play is quite important in Wild Nacatl, and then your turn 2 play, you've got Tarmogoyf, always, and I am sort of unsure here on whether I need to dump my Mentors for more 2-drops and replace them with Young Pyros, which are doing basically the same thing, but Monastery Mentor is just such a great closer. I've got a game that's a match that's going to be going up. So it should be up by the time this deck tech goes up against a strange, grindy Abzan sort of build. And it closed out the game sensationally there. They had an Auriok champion out, and gaining life off each Monk token is just not fast enough when the Monk tokens are swinging back with Prowess the next turn. Especially if you get a Bloodbraid Elf, Cascade into a Helix or a Bolt to the face. They're just taking a lot of damage. So the deck can go quite fast. Like, I had a match where I had my opponent on 12 life, and I'm sure they felt safe until I hit them for 4 damage with Tarmogoyf and then emptied out the 2 Boros Charms out of my hand. So in those times, the Boros Charms look excellent, but yeah, every time I think about ditching the Boros Charms, I just think about moments like that. They're a little bit of extra reach that I get, and that hidden mode, the indestructibility, is just so hard to say no to. So that's sort of what I'm sort of looking at, maybe, yeah, cutting the Mentors for Pyros, or putting in a couple of Pyros. I already have 17 creatures, which I feel is a solid amount for a mid-range shell. especially when especially just with the strength of the creatures. I mean, that's the name of the game with creatures in a mid-range shell. You're just slamming individual threats. You know, they don't necessarily have to synergize terribly well. That not, I mean, Monastery Mentor can synergize incredibly well when you've got, you know, non-creature spells in hand, or if you hit them with Bloodbraid Elf on the Cascade. But yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I feel like my breakdown is fine, but I mean, there's always more room to improve. And I put up a deck tech quite prematurely of one of the other decks, and it's ended up changing so many times that I sort of regret even doing that deck tech. It's so out of date now. So on with the creatures. Here we've got the 4 Tarmogoyf, the 2 Monastery Mentors in the 3-drop slot, and 3 Tireless Trackers in the 3-drop slot as well. Which is when I look at the fact that I've got 5 3-drops and 4 2-drop creatures, it really makes me consider that I possibly should drop the Mentors. But it's it's just something I've got to look at more and continue to play test and just assess situations when I've got the Mentor and just consider how they could have gone differently if it was a young Pyromancer. If I've got the Monastery Mentor in hand and I'm lacking a turn 2 play, or if my Tarmogoyf gets Thought Seized or something, if I do have a turn 2 play and then that goes, I'm really wishing I had the young Pyro. So I mean, that's just something that I've got to play around with a little bit more and sort of weigh up whether it's worth making a change. It's always worth changing things around and testing, but I'm not sure if it's a permanent change. That's the whole idea of changing things around and testing. So anyway, yeah, the Monastery Mentors, great closer. Tireless Tracker, card advantage written all over it. It's Tireless Tracker speaks for itself. We all know Tireless Tracker. It's crucial in any mid-range. Any and all mid-range shells are running green, and it's crucial in that spot. Bloodbraid Elf, 4 of. Need I say more? With all these spells, there's nothing the Bloodbraid Elf can't hit on the Cascade. I don't care if I'm cascading into a Tarmogoyf or a Tireless Tracker, or whether I'm cascading into a Lightning Bolt or a Lightning Helix. There are very few bad cascades in this deck. Very, very few bad. The worst cascade you can probably get is a Path to Exile or a Faithless Looting, depending on the board state and the state of your hand. So that's our creature suite. That's our 17 creatures. And on with our non-creature spells, we've got the Crashing Footfalls, a new card that was brought out in Modern Horizons, and it's just so much fun. I have hit it off the Cascade a couple times on Bloodbraid Elf, and it's such a good feeling. It's great. And then they hit you with Force of Despair or whatever that new Black Force is that kills all creatures that came out that turn. That's not something I've actually been hit with, and I'm sure there are many better hits to have with that. I just recently came up against a Goblin deck and wished I had a Force of Despair there. Not that I have anything black to pitch with it, but my goodness, yeah, Grenzo was coming hard at me with a whole lot of tokens with the War Chief out, giving him haste. But yeah, the Crashing Footfalls, 2/4/4 Rhinos, that's fine. They've got Trample. So it's, they're out of bolt range. You're gonna have to use it. You're gonna have to spend some resources. So to get 2 bodies out of the one card, the suspend isn't great, but the deck is designed to run that long. If you can spend it on turn 1, you're getting those Rhinos. And if you're not getting those Rhinos, then it's not your game or you haven't done something correctly. So Crushing Footfalls is just... There are times when I have it in my hand and I wish it was a Bolt. Or I wish I had extra copies of, maybe like a Lava Spike or a Shard Volley or something. Just preferably something that can hit a creature. But we'll have more on that when I get to the Boros Charms. But anyway, so we've got the Path to Exile. It's, I'm running white in a mid-range grindy shell. I want to be able to remove stuff. So that's, Paths, the Bolts and the Helixes. They're all going to create at creatures mostly. It depends how the board state looks, how they're going for life, and how much damage I feel like I can push through in the next couple of turns. But really, these cards, the Lightning Bolt, the Path to Exile, the Lightning Helix, they're designed to make the game run long enough to make cards like Crashing Footfalls and Tireless Tracker and Monastery Mentor more relevant, and to give me more time to get Blood Braids and hit the Cascades on them because card advantage, right? That's the name of the game in a mid-range build. The Faithless Lootings, Another card that speaks for itself. We've got plenty of stuff that's pitchable to it. I'm more than happy to pitch a little bit of face burn, crashing footfalls if they're in my hand, and the lands. The lands go quite often. That's the main usage for the Faithless Lootings in the deck, is just to get rid of extra lands and just to go through a few extra cards. If I'm in a situation where maybe a bit of face burn can get me over the line, or if I'm just looking for that bit of spot removal to equalise and stabilise the board state, the Faithless Looting can get me there. Or it can at least get me closer to something that Bloodbraid Elf can hit. I mean, it does feel bad when you're Faithless Looting and you hit a Crashing Footfalls when you could have cascaded it with the Bloodbraid Elf, but you know, that's just part of Magic, and it's it makes the times when you do hit it mean even more. So that's most of my non-creature stuff. The Lightning Helixes and the Bolts there, basically I explained, along with the Path to Exile. They're pretty much always going creatures. You rarely want to go face with those. And the Boros Charm. 4 damage to the face, or your permanents gain indestructible. So, I mean, it's cool for combat stuff to be able to make yourself indestructible, whether you're attacking or blocking. But the best thing about the indestructibility, Supreme Verdict. Oh, I can't counter Supreme Verdict. Oh, well, that's fine. All my stuff's indestructible. It's as far as I'm aware of, it's one of the only answers to Supreme Verdict in the entire in the game. Not just in the format, but in the entire game. All the strongest counter spells don't stop it because it can't be countered. I mean, I'm not like I'm running blue anyway, but this is how red-white, a deck that's running red-white, can deal with things like that, can deal with board wipes and sweepers. So that's why I find it very hard to pull out Boros Charm, because I know blue-white it's a mainstay, it's always going to be around, and you just want to have a Boros Charm when they try and wrath you. Like, Wrath, Day of Judgment, Supreme Verdict. Tell you what it doesn't beat. Terminus. But, I mean, not many things beat Terminus. Counterspells beat Terminus. That's great. But, you know, we found our middle ground here. And I feel like Terminus takes a little bit more of a setup to get their best value out of it. They need to be able to place it on top of their deck to get the miracle draw off it, to really be able to maximize the value. Otherwise, it's just another 6-drop board wipe that doesn't even actually wipe the board. So, and I'm more than happy to throw a bunch of throw my creatures back in my library. If I've got a board full of a few creatures, hopefully not tokens, fingers crossed, I'm happy to throw that stuff back in and then just cascade it again with Bloodbraid. I mean, wouldn't that feel bad? Wipe my Monastery Mentor, my Tarmogoyf, and a Tireless Tracker, and then I cast Bloodbraid Elf and hit the Tireless Tracker you just put on the bottom of my library after I shuffle with a cracked fetch. I mean, we're almost living in magical Christmas land there, but the way some matches go against blue-white control, you just got to take yourself to magical Christmas land and just try and stay there for as long as you can. So that's most of the deck. We will have a little look at the sideboard. We got the classic Grave 8. I mean, Hogak has been banned now, but all that means is that you don't mainboard your hate. That just stops you from mainboarding ley lines. It just means that instead of mainboarding a few pieces and sideboarding 4 to 6, you're just sideboarding it all instead now again, just as it was when Phoenix and Dredge were the problematic graveyard interactive decks. So you just need that stuff in there. It really, really hurts. A relic really, really hurts. Hurts me. I'm not sure. I maybe Rest in Peace. I don't think Rest in Peace is actually better for my purposes. It's a 1-drop graveyard hate piece. It's just too hard to sort of say no to. So that graveyard hate all speaks for itself for anyone who's familiar with the modern format at the moment. I do have the Arcanist in here. It's just extra creature stuff. Extra creatures. I'm not sure what extra non-creature stuff I'm looking to put in here. I don't think I want to. Maybe I do want an extra. Maybe that Mentor goes for Boros Charm. Hey, I'm going to do that now. As a matter of fact, put him there. I don't feel like I really want the Mentor. If I want the Mentor's effect anymore, I'm putting on Young Pirate. It's because I want more creatures more quickly. And if I want more creatures more quickly, I don't want another 3-drop. I want a 2-drop that does something very similar. So that's where the sideboard's at. It's still in very early stages, as you can tell. It's not very developed. I don't have any answers for I need wear and tear. I need shenanigans maybe. I need some answers for enchant. I need some enchantment and artifact removal. But you know, this is still the very early days. I'm mostly concerned about the initial 60. and then working out how I can tweak it with my extra 15, and then focusing on the full 75 once I sort of know exactly what I'm doing with this deck. But you know, for the most part, I feel like it's mostly nailed down what I've got here. I feel like I can mostly, jeez, I've got to slide that over a little bit more to make everything fit. Yeah, I feel like it's mostly set in stone. I do consider perhaps trying more lands. Maybe the Crashing Footfalls go, if I had to make any changes. The lands, the Footfalls, and the Boros Charms. The things that I'm sort of not sure about. And Nacatl just really belongs in an aggro shell, but I just want to make that turn 1 threat. I want to apply pressure early. When making this mid-range deck, this Naya mid-range deck, red, white, green, it's important to think about what this shell can do that other mid-range decks don't. So the other stronger mid-range decks in the format, grindy mid-range decks, are obviously Jund, the Rock, the black-green, and Mardu Pyromancer. All those decks run black, and so they have extra spot removal for that reason. Jund and Mardu Pyromancer run a bit of burn. Mardu Pyromancer even has access to Lightning Helix and Boros Charm. They don't use Boros Charm in Mardu Pyromancer because it can't hit creatures. I'm sure that's sort of part of the reason. I'm not even sure they're running Lightning Helix now. They've had Smiting Helix printed, which is a very pitchable version of Lightning Helix, which turns into Lightning Helix on it for its flashback cost. So, yeah, and basically you got to look at what those decks try and do, and what you can do differently to those decks. And so basically, my attempt to rationalize building this deck and what it can do differently to those other decks is the reach. Is the reach through the burn. I mean, Jund does have a little bit of burn, but I don't feel like Jund can be as aggressive as this deck. This deck can win on turn 4. It can win on turn 4. It might not look like it, but that is actually something that can happen. I think it's with a Bloodbraid. I think you need a turn 2 Tarmogoyf, a couple of burn spells. You might need a Nacatl or Tarmogoyf. You basically need to curve out. I think if you curve out and draw burn spells, you can win with this deck by turn 4. That doesn't sound very impressive compared to other decks in the format, but hey, let's remember, Modern is supposed to be a turn 4 format. You wouldn't think so with decks such as Neoform Gristlebrand going around, but you know, and the Infect these days can win on turn 2 with Scale Up, which was not even addressed in the latest BNR announcement. But I mean, hey, they obviously had their hands full with Hogak and trying to make the correct call there. I don't think, by the way, I don't think that Infect is unhealthy. Is it an unhealthy strength for the format at the moment? It's just sort of an example. But yeah, so this deck can go fast, and it has the ability to win out of nowhere. If the opponent blocks up their board, if the opponent is also running a mid-rangey sort of shell, and they block up their board with elemental tokens, or they've got a huge Scavenging Ooze and a Tarmogoyf, that does not matter. We can either go wide with the Monastery Mentor tokens, which we generate from hitting them with face burn, because there's no point burning a 5/6 Tarmogoyf, or we just go face with the burn. And so that is actually why I am considering leaving this extra Boros Charm in there, because I feel like this deck wants to go mid-range against any deck that it can't race, and against mid-range decks it wants to race. It wants to transform into an aggro deck when it takes on another mid-range deck and try and outrace any other mid-range deck. I did have Bedlam Revelers for card advantage. I have had some issues with card advantage since I took them out. It's just something for me to look into. I also have Light Up the Stage in one of my other builds there, because at the moment I don't have a lot for card advantage. I have Faithless Looting is not card advantage. It is card, where the first time you use it, it's card disadvantage, and then when you flash it back, it's card selection. So, it's, yeah. I'm sort of lacking on card advantage options. Tireless Tracker and Bloodbraid Elf are really my main advantages to getting card advantage. And also, Monastery Mentor turns every burn spell into a 2-for-1. You kill their whatever, and you create a token for it. So you pay 1 mana for a 1/1 body, and you're actually hitting them or their creature for 3 damage. So Monastery Mentor, in that regard, can be a form of card advantage, in that it's sort of a split between card and board advantage. It creates board advantage through your cards. So it's, yeah. Do I want to put Bedlam Reveler back in? Absolutely. Do I want Light Up the Stage? Absolutely. Can I squeeze them in? That's the question. So that's where this deck is at the moment. I do have a couple of questions around card advantage and just the exact efficacy of Footfalls and Boros Charm, but I feel like I think Crashing Footballs is a lot closer to being cut than something like Boros Charm, which has its value in defining this deck versus other mid-range decks. Not as necessarily in matches against them, but when compared to other mid-range decks, you need to look once again at what your deck, whatever build you're trying to make, can do differently. Otherwise, it's just a strictly worse version of a deck that already exists. I mean, so what do we have? We have Burn. We have Direct Burn. No other mid-range shells really point to that, probably because it lessens their threat density in the long game. So, having an extra copy of Monetary Mentor, an extra copy of Tireless Tracker, or if I dropped all those Boros Charms, I could have Scavenging Ooze. Scavenging Ooze. I mean, can anyone say no to Scavenging Ooze? Well, yes, if they're trying to make a shell of a deck that is different to what's already being done. I feel like if I cut Scavenging Ooze in, I'm getting far too close to a Jund build, and I'm not doing enough different. I want that face burn. I mean, maybe it's not going to work, and I'm just going to end up making a poor man's Jund, swapping out the black for the white. But swapping out the black for the white opens up these red-white spells, these red-white burn spells, and gives us extra reach. And that is an important thing. It gives us extra reach, but primarily they go at creatures. And allow us to sort of develop a board state, an advantageous board state to the point where we won't have to send them at the face anymore. If we just send them we won't have to send them at creatures anymore, and then we can send them at the face. Having the burn doesn't necessarily mean I want to race to win at turn 3, turn 4, just because the deck can. Having the burn means that I can push through and get those extra few points of damage on turn 10 when they've got their board blocked up, and maybe I've got a couple of tokens but not enough to swing through. And so that's where that extra bit of burn can be handy, and where this deck is, where I'm trying to define this deck as something different from all the other mid-range shells. So anyway, that wasn't really much of a mini deck tech. We've gone up to, we're over 20 minutes now. I wouldn't call it a mini deck tech. But yeah, that's the deck tech. It's probably I've gone almost a week without changing this drastically. It's probably the longest that any of these iterations have survived since I started trying to make a build around Dreadhorde Arcanist. And I like it. It's fun to play. I'm not sure if it's necessarily strong or if it shows that much promise in the long term, but I'm going to keep trying, and we'll see what we can do. But yeah, that's it, and just stay tuned for some more gameplay footage, and hopefully not too many deck takes in the near future, and hopefully it won't change it too much. Alright.